All right, I'm back. Home stretch, closure on this thing. I'm excited about it. It's been kind of rocky. This is my fourth attempt at this video. And I write up a narrative and get through it and just go, man, I got lost, went down some rabbit trails. And you can do that real easy when you're trying to do this. Man, it's awfully presumptuous to even think you could get through the meat of this in a one video. So, man, I gotta pick my lanes here. To begin with, we're gonna get into right away stuff that I know the Christian community dismisses as New Age, and that marvels me when I hear that, and I have heard that. When all these concepts existed for thousands of years before the birth of Jesus, and I don't know how new it. I mean, how old it has to be not New Age. Maybe when back then it was their New Age, but these concepts I'm going to present are not New Age. And I think by the time we get to the end of this video, you'll agree with me. And certainly the video and the book. Once again, this is the book that predicated this channel, and it's From Genesis to Revelation, a story you find yourself in. And then I was going to define what this channel is going to be about, and it's going to be about experiential spirituality. Experiential spirituality. And to define that, and I'm going to be reading a lot today because I can't commit this stuff to memory. I am sorry. I'll be looking down and all over. Experiential spirituality, as defined by me, is bringing the power of our spiritual natures, which is the Christ, within each of us, and marrying it with Eastern philosophies of practicing, leading one into unity consciousness, back into unity consciousness. We start out as one, Jesus tells us, then we become two. And what are we going to do when we become two? Well, that's the caterpillar crawl, and we want to become a butterfly. And that's what this journey is all about. We're all on the same journey, and there is a singular truth to that. At one point they said, hey, what kind of faith are you? And I said, well, man, I'm a Christian. Well, then I started debating what that meant. And then me and my wife went, well, maybe we're omniist. Well, we believe that there's an element of truth in all religions, and I believe that. But then when you look at experiential spirituality, there just really isn't a way to practice it. You pursue it. And you pursue it with the truth of what the Bible's telling us about Christ. Christ is the Messiah. That is the single truth. And you don't have to agree with me, and I'm okay with that. And it's your life, it's your journey. And I'll get back into that at the end, because there's some things that I want to say about it. So, the way I want to approach this, I'm going to rush through like I did the doctrines before we started the letters, the doctrines of practiced Christianity. And I'm going to go through the major concepts of what you find in Revelation, kind of give you a construct of what they are, so then when you read it, you can pick up on it. But this isn't a Bible class or a Bible school. It's not necessarily a Bible channel. It's just pursuing experiential spirituality. The Bible is the book on what it is, and it's really, it's the biggest tool of all. And the Bible is a book on your psychology. I'm not a psychologist. I learned a lot of psychology trying to dissect my story, and I found my story in the esoteric Bible. It's like I turned my pursuit of knowledge into pursuit of wisdom, and I don't think I can make it wise without God's help. And I believe God helped me find what I found. And some people say, oh, that's really arrogant and presumptuous. And I say, well, knock yourselves out. I'm okay with that. So I'm going to go through them one by one. And there are, just to give you a heads up, how many we're going to hit on, there are 14. So the first is, we start in chapter 6. The Lamb's taken the book, had the courage, believed he was worthy, was ready to start. And the book of the seven seals. So in chapter 6, it starts. He opens the first seal. And what pops up are the four horsemen. And the first one's white, second one's red, third one's black, the last one's ashen. And you know, I'm taking the position, they went out throughout the earth. And they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth. Well, just back at where we are in this journey, the heart center is under the dominion of the earth, but it's not considered part of the earth and the heavens. It's the expanse between the two. And you know, when you have an unregenerate heart, we've talked, doesn't have the walls around it, and impulses coming out of your earth, the lower three, rush up into your heart unchecked, it's subconscious, and that place they turn into a thought, and potentially action is taken upon them. When there are no walls, those thoughts rush right on through the heart center and up into your heavens, presumptuously, pretentiously, and it affects the thoughts, you know, coming back down, and your thoughts coming out of your heaven in the unregenerate state, they land back down into this corrupted heart center, and we're going to find out that that's Babylon, and so those thoughts really are from a corrupted persona, the serpent persona, and we're going to see how all that it shifts. Secondly, the tools used by the four horsemen are similar to and synonymous with the tools used by God in motivating Pharaoh to let the Israelites exit. So it precedes the Exodus. You know, all the different plagues and events, and you can kind of see how they're all designed to affect the earth. You know, that lower self and diseases and pestilence and take things away. The whole journey of this is we have this ego self. It's that other image, and that ego attaches to almost everything that is, you know, comfort related, you know, financial gain, material wealth, ideologies, and so what happens is in this battle that's going to play out, you're seeing the things that the ego identifies with, attaches to, that forms the identity of that image, is gradually taken away. And you saw that in the life of Job. You know, the things that he held dear when they were taken away, it resulted in humiliation and shame. And that's what happens when you're being deconstructed, is those feelings rush up, and that's the tool of the serpent. He wants you to feel guilty. He wants you to feel shame and humiliation. And that's one thing I think Alan Watts says, you know, religion has made an art form out of institutionalized or making guilt a virtue when we're on this journey. I mean, you know, we're always made to feel guilt. And when you go back to the root of that, it's fear. And the opposite of love is not hate. Hate's it's a derivative of fear. So it's love and fear are the opposites. So you see a lot in the Bible, you know, we're being told do not fear, because that is that part of us that is expressing its way of defense and resistance to hold on to those attachments. The second thing, the third. The first four spirits or chakras, and I'm using the New Age stuff, so just brace yourself. Those four are associated with the four elements of the zodiac. And so you'll see, and it's all through, you know, this account of Revelation, Earth is the root chakra is associated with the earth. The sacral chakra is associated with water. The solar plexus or power chakra is associated with fire. And then the heart center, the heart chakra, is associated with air. And you'll see when we get through it, when it says it is done, after the seventh bowl of wrath was dropped on the air, that was the end of the Battle of Armageddon. And that's when you're coming back into unity consciousness. But there's still some things that have to happen even after that. The fourth, the characteristics of the 12 tribes of Israel. When you read them, the accounts in the Old Testament, they do correlate back to the characteristics found in the 12 signs of the zodiac. And the woman sitting in Revelation, she's sitting in Babylon, ready to give birth, and she's clothed in the sun. We talked about that. The moon's under her feet. Talked about that. And she's wearing a crown with 12 stars. Well, that symbolizes her children, the 12 tribes, and every one of us fits within one of those signs of the zodiac. And trust me, I haven't studied that stuff. Don't know how deep I'll go into it. But I think that's what it's signifying here in the Bible. And once you pick up on that imagery of the celestial items, the celestial creation, and I've seen plenty, watched a lot of videos, read plenty of stuff, commentaries, where our physical environment has direct impacts on our body. I mean, our body resonates at the same hertz as the earth. And that's why, hey, you take off your shoes and you put your feet in sand and walk along the beach. I mean, there's an instantaneous alignment with that, the way your body's vibrating. Man, it's just curious stuff. Man, you just can't dismiss it out of hand. And so that's, so the fifth, the 144,000, the remnant, that goes back to the Old Testament, that shows up two times in the account that we're gonna run through, and I've chosen to believe it represents the heavenly host, those that have gone before us, that have satisfied the journey, came to consciousness, anointed Son of God, and they're up there, and the angels and the whole heavenly host, they're up there watching what we're doing, and they're rooting us on, and because they know the toil, I mean, they know how hard it is, and I've gone to that imagery a number of times during my battle when I just feel so alone. I just go, I know, I feel it, I'm not alone. So that's what I think it's saying. 6, the two witnesses, I think it's chapter 11, and it shows up, they're in the heart center area of the Revelation. And I think the two witnesses represent divine love and divine wisdom. And those are the characteristics of the higher self, unconditional love and wisdom, as compared to the lower self, which is conditional love and knowledge, the intellect. And it gets back to the battle of the head and the heart. The moon represents reflected light, reflected intelligence, wisdom. It's not wisdom, it's intelligence. When you're clothed in the sun, then you've acquired wisdom, and that's just part of the journey. The other significance in that is it's in verse 11:2. It talks about the outer court. It says, hey, the outer court's going to stay, and this isn't going to be completed as long as the outer court is still standing. And this battle is going to go on for 42 months. And that just signifies what we said the other day. I think it's Hebrews 9:8. The Holy Spirit signifies this, that the way to the holy place is not disclosed as long as the outer court is still standing. If that hasn't been opened and conquered, then we're not going to see that next thing. And that kind of go back to the two witnesses. We've already mentioned it before. The lower self kills the higher self various times in our battle. It subdues it, like the goat and the ram, Cain and Abel. Esau wanted to kill Jacob. And that's what that's signifying, is that there comes a time in our battle and our ascension that we're just that part of us is going to get beat up. It's going to get killed, but like Cain and Abel, we're going to have the next thing, the next evolution, the next replacement, and that came in the form of Seth. Because we're always going to have a higher self, but that lower self is really, it's either going to try to kill it, or it's going to try to commingle to the point where you're pretty much as good as dead. And those challenges happen in our psyche all day, every day. The seventh, this was a big one, and it's the temple of God and the Ark of the Covenant. Once again, we've already covered it. The Ark of the Covenant, it shows up in the Old Testament as the tabernacle holding the Ark of the Covenant, and within the Ark of the Covenant is the testimony, which are the Ten Commandments, the stone tablets, and God lives in that Ark of the Covenant while the Israelites are journeying out of Egypt to the Promised Land. Likewise, God lives inside of us as we make our journey. We do our caterpillar crawl. God's in us, and He's tucked away in a place where we got to go find Him, and He's undefiled. Our divine is undefiled while we're on the caterpillar crawl, and then it transforms in the cocoon. Then it becomes the butterfly. And I do want to read something out of Hebrews, and it's chapter 9, verses 23 through 28. I'm going to read it, so pay attention. Therefore it was necessary for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed with these, but the heavenly things themselves the better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter a holy place made with hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor was it that he would offer himself often as the high priest enters the holy place year by year with the blood that is not his own. Otherwise, he would have needed to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now, once at the consummation of the ages, he has been manifested to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And inasmuch as it appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment, so Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time for salvation, without reference to sin, to those who eagerly await him. So without reference to sin, forgiveness is baked into this. And the second coming, it happens as we awaken and come into consciousness. The tabernacle not built by hands was the tabernacle built by God, and that's our bodies. And then, he had to do it once. He did it for all of us. At the same time, when we do it once. It's not something that ever happens again. When you come to consciousness, you're there. When that process starts, when your eyes first open, then you've got to finish the process, and then there is this time period of adjustment where you kind of go back into subconscious from time to time. It's very, very frustrating. You think I made it, and then you realize, well, you didn't. You're still assimilating. You're still having to, you're rebooting your program. You're doing some new code, and you're befriending your ego self, because you got to have that. It doesn't die. Like, Cain said, hey, if they find me, I'm going to die. God said, no, they're not going to kill you, but your world's going to be flipped over. You're going from the master to the servant. And that guy has to learn how to be the servant. And then you have to figure out what that interface with the world out there looks like and feels like, because you see the world in a different context. It's different. As Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, is that when you see the world after you've become one, all you see is a carcass, and the world is not worthy of you. And me and my wife talk about it all the time. It's very awkward to see it at a 30,000 foot level for what it is. And you hear in the spiritual circles, well, the world is an illusion, and the you that you thought you were is an illusion. And I didn't used to understand that language, but now I do. And I think illusion is probably one of the best words to use, even though it's still inadequate to really express what it is that you're experiencing. And the Ark of the Covenant, it's opened in chapter 11, verse 19, and then later, and that's the fifth chakra opening. Then later, the sixth chakra opens, and it's necessary for the fifth to open in order to complete the battle for authority, which we're going to see. But it's necessary for the sixth to open to complete the battle, and that's in 15, verse 5. And so here's something that, for those that are indoctrinated into a religious institutional belief system, which I was, and I'm not denigrating it, although by the time we get finished with this, it's going to feel like I've launched a nuclear-tipped torpedo into the broadside of religion, and I didn't intend to do that. That wasn't my aim. But as I've just I've gone through the process, and really doing these videos has helped, because when you have to talk about it, writing something is one thing, but when you have to express it, it's just a different animal. And as I talk these words, I realize I just don't fit in that world. And I wish that I did have a group of people around me that were encouraging, that were on the same journey, that could understand and wanted to talk about it. But right now, all I got is my wife, and that's a wonderful thing. I found her, at some point, but we found each other. We were at the same place. We were at the door, and she comes out of a Catholic background. I started out Baptist and Church of Christ, and then I bounced around, and now I'm on a membership role of a non-denominational here in town. I haven't attended it in a long time, but to go where this book goes and where I'm going in these videos is, you have to make a choice to say, hey, I'm going to give this a chance and evaluate it, or you're just going to lock down and you're just going to dismiss it. You're going to be one of those that says, well, that's just a new age guy. Knock yourself out. And so then I thought right here it'd be, the Lord's Prayer. I talked about the scripture that related to the Antichrist and how it's important between has and in. Jesus has come, and Jesus is come. Well, in the Lord's Prayer, it's the same thing. But like that other verse I referred to, the King James Version got it right. My current Bible doesn't have it right, and it doesn't have the Lord's Prayer right. Lord's Prayer is, our Father that art in heaven, hallowed be in thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done upon the earth and in heaven. Well, the King James has it right. It's in earth as it is in heaven. So it's in our lower selves and it's in our upper selves. And that's what the Lord's Prayer is pointing to. But just with that slight change, the esoteric meaning just got crushed. It's gone. There is no esoteric meaning. Just like with the Antichrist. You lose the esoteric meaning. Okay, so that's number 7. Number 8, back to the woman giving birth in chapter 12. Okay, getting this concept, it really is the coup de grace. This pulls it all together. And what we're going to see is that there's a dual nature to Eve. She's the subconscious. Subconscious seat of that is the heart center. And, we go through progression, and Revelation is showing us the Babylon version of the unregenerate heart, and then it's navigating us to the New Jerusalem, which is the heart center with the walls rebuilt, the beautiful gates and emeralds, and then that's what the Lamb marries. It's the new Adam, the last Adam, the life-giving spirit. The Lamb marries this perfected heart center, and they become one, because it also says at that point that there's no longer any sea. So there's no more subconscious. Eve has merged back into Adam, and they're back in unity consciousness. And so I'm saying here, the woman giving birth, she's in Babylon because she's in the heart center waiting, but it's the old Jerusalem. It's the one that is before the New Jerusalem. And that woman is Sarah. Sarah birthed Isaac. Isaac was the one who received the second covenant from God, and that's when his laws are written on your heart and they're written in your mind. That's when your heart's been Christed. And your mind now is not receiving error thoughts blowing through your heart center undetected and not evaluated. And then whatever pure thoughts you have are not going into a corrupted subconscious, which is where it turns into a thought. So you may be thinking something, noble and pure, but it's still got to go through a grand central station that is not going to come out and manifest and create the fruit that you intended when you had that impulse, because it just can't. That's what God says. The natural body, the flesh, cannot please God. It doesn't want to please God, and that's why God says in Malachi, kind of at the end of the end of the Old Testament, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. And to hear God say he hates anything, you've got to pay attention. Well, he hates that persona in us. And what he hates more is when that persona says, I see, I got it right. That's the worst place to be. I was there. I get it. I understand it now. And so really, I think I'm going to read this. I'm 27 minutes into it, but I'm really covering a lot of ground. Tell me, you who want to be under the law, do you listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the bondwoman and one by the free woman. But the sons of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and the son of the free woman was through the promise. This is allegorically speaking, for these women are two covenants, one proceeding from Mount Sinai, bearing children who are to be slaves, and she is Hagar. Now, this isn't allegorically speaking. If Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Ishmael is allegorical, that's just telling you, regardless if it happened or not, and I'm not advocating either way, I don't really care. I said it'd be really cool if it all really did happen, and I have no reason not to believe that. I'm not a scholar. But that just tells you that everything else leading up to that and after that is allegoric. There's an allegoric meaning. It's something other than the literal. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The next verse, verse 25. Now this Hagar is okay, I already said that, children. For she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free. She is our mother. For it is written, rejoice, barren woman who does not bear, break forth and shout, you who are not in labor, for more numerous are the children of the desolate than of the one who has a husband. And you, brethren, like Isaac, are children of promise. But as at that time he was born according to the flesh, persecuted, who was born according to the Spirit. And so it is now. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be an heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of a bondwoman, but of a free woman. And so, a lot of mention of the son. Well, Ishmael, it's the lower self. And then we have all these nations and all these strongholds within us, signified by that. Ishmael, the Esau persona. Ham, the son of Noah, who, his son was Canaan, and we're going to see a little bit of that later. It's kind of curious how these names mean something. And I'm going to get back into it. We talk about the tree of life and the Euphrates, the river that splits into four. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So you get that concept, everything just kind of goes, and it just starts falling into place. Number 9, verse 12, 15, and it says, and the serpent poured out water, chasing after the woman after she gave birth, so that he might cause her to get caught up in the flood. And after your eyes have opened, and inside you're feeling this conflict. For me, it was the conflict between what my religion had taught me and what I believe versus what I was experiencing. It was different. Something was happening that I'd never heard of. I didn't know what was happening. And it was like, hey, I'm not a bad guy, but this stuff has caught up with me. The wave got me, and what's going on. So it's a flood of thoughts, and a lot of it is guilt, shame, fear. I can't tell anybody about this. I can't ask for help from those people that are in that mode, because they're just under the breath, they're going, well, you did a lot of stupid stuff. You're getting what you deserve. It looks sort of, you did it to yourself. And I'm not disputing it. I've always said, hey, I did it to myself. But this isn't what I wanted. Something's going on here that, I'm being broken down systemically, and there's got to be a good reason for it. I remember talking to Tom. He's saying, hey, you're being whacked. And I said, well, I'm doing a good enough job for myself. But I said, Tom, I pray. And I did say this prayer all the time, even up to this day, is, God, I'm trusting you're taking me somewhere, and I'm getting whacked. This is painful. This is hurting. I'm humiliated. I'm shamed by my behavior, but things that are being taken away from my identity. I'm collapsing, and you just, when you get there, I just said, I can't make sense of it, but I'm trusting you, so don't stop until you show me what this is all about. I said, I'd rather have wisdom than relief, because I got to see where this connects in my life, my story. And then that caused me to circle back and say, where is it in the Bible? Because no one's ever talked to me about this stuff. And whenever you do try to go there, it's like the immediate defense is, well, you're getting caught up in New Age stuff. And I go, well, okay. And here, those error thoughts, when you first experience that, because that's when you've seen the other guy, and I have that written up in my book. It's in the very first section. That's what I went to Tom with. We talked about it. I said, man, I saw my other guy, and something in there wanted me dead, and I don't understand it. But then you start having this barrage of thoughts, and I had that first vision. It was January 23rd, 2019, and then I fast forward. I had my all-night vigil. That was bizarre. April 5th. And then Monday, April 8th, is when I had my Nehemiah moment. And I have it in both books. It comes out of the middle section. And so, that's kind of, it's in there where your eyes have opened. But, I thought I had passed through those urges to commit suicide. But just the stuff was catching up with me, and my mind just got so noisy. I could not meditate. I could not quiet it down. And I called Tom, and I go, man, Tom, I'm so sorry to do this to you again, but man, I'm really having bad thoughts. And we talked it through, and I did meditation 3 or 4 times that day. And they kept progressing, and then, in one of them I just went, God, I got thoughts cramming into thoughts, creating new thoughts, and I can't, there's so much noise. I don't want to feel this way, help me. And then about that time, man, I just saw a wall pop up in my vision. And it just kept growing. And right outside in front of the wall were soldiers, Roman soldiers lined up. The shield up to their chest and the big spears. And that's, I had befriended my ego. I named him Peter. Go figure, And I was able to put him off to the side, and and him not bother me too much. But that day he was just going crazy, and I was at war with this guy, and when they raised their shields and slammed it to the ground, everything just went quiet. It was like lightning and thunder. It was just like, it was so unbelievable. And so from then on, I went to that, when I'd go into meditation, I would say, show me the wall. I want to see the wall. And it gradually was further and further and further to the point where it wasn't even on the horizon. I'd almost have to physically or mentally try to travel out to see how far my wall had gotten. And now I don't ever see it again. It's just out there. This is far out stuff, but I experienced it. It's crazy. I wrote it down. I'm telling you about it. Vulnerability times 10. Okay. Now, Jesus says in this moment, you're going to be disturbed. And verse 2 of the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said, those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they are disturbed, they will marvel and will reign over all. And after they have reigned, they will rest. And then he goes on to say, you have to know yourself. You got to see yourself. You have to figure out. You got to see that there is this guy that has an identity that's a conglomeration of experiences in the natural body, that he's attached to whatever it is in his life that makes him relevant. All right, so from there, we go to the beast of the sea. And we talked about that. The beast of the sea shows up, and it's an amalgamation of all four beasts. And in that mode, it's under the dominion of the serpent, as represented by the leopard with the four heads, and they all represent four different natures, personas of the serpent. But back in Daniel, it says, when it described the leopard, he said, and dominion was given to it. And then it says, when they lose their dominion, which they already have by this point, all three of the earth, those beasts have lost their dominion, but they said they will hold on to it for a little while. And that's signified by this amalgamation of all of them, and that turns into the Leviathan. The Leviathan is referred to as he, both here and in the book of Job. But the book of Enoch, it said that the behemoth and Leviathan were created the same day as Adam and Eve in the garden. And it refers to Leviathan as a female, aligning with Eve and the subconscious. Well, the reason that they're being referred to by male in the Bible is because back in the book of Enoch, it's referring to that place where they were yet to be defiled. And, Leviathan, it's like being a baby. Leviathan didn't have a persona, neither did the behemoth. It was the potential of that persona. And all of our behemoths and Leviathans are different depending on the kind of experiences that we've had, our essential disposition to begin with, and what have you. So, that's why that it flips, where Leviathan is really that of the female part, but it's under the dominion of the serpent. And that's when it comes out of the sea. The red dragon was up in heaven. He had already been tossed down to the earth. And it says, and the serpent gave the beast his authority. And then the beast of the earth, which is now next, when he shows up, he exercises the authority of the beast when it's in its presence. And then it still has its horn. So the subconscious lost its ability, its power to project out the ego persona, independent. So now it has to marry up with this consciousness that is fighting, beginning to awake, but is still fighting in the natural body. And so it doesn't have authority of its own because it's still not awake, it's still asleep. And until you fully awake, and then you reorient and you basically rebuild that guy, you're still in that dark night of the soul. It's that dark night of the soul period. And that's where I look at the tribulation, or the 1,000 years, is, you you've already tossed the false prophet away, and you've tossed the beast, but Satan still gets to hang around, that serpent persona, until you pass through this dark night of the soul, because he's still tormenting you. He was tormenting me until you find yourself, until you really get a grip and pull it together, and then you can kick Satan out for good. And so I think that's the symbolism there. Number 12, the 6 bowls of wrath. This kind of marks the end of Armageddon. And it's real curious that the 6 bowls of wrath, they're poured out sequentially. They're first poured out on the earth, which is 2 things: the unconscious consciousness sitting in the first chakra, the behemoth, and then the second is poured into the sea, which is the subconscious, and the Leviathan, the beast of the sea. But the sea, that's just the sea. The sea and the waters are really different. The third is poured on the rivers and the waters. And so that's associated with the sacral chakra, the second chakra. Excuse me. The fourth is poured on the sun to scorch men. Well, that's the third chakra. That's for the seat of power. And that's symbolized by fire. Once again, the first chakra is the earth. The second chakra is the water. This third chakra is fire. And then the sixth is poured out on the great river Euphrates. And this is, this is pretty interesting at this point. That represents the tree of life. Euphrates is the river that flows out of your brain down into your spinal column. The spiritual fluid it's referred to in many spiritual circles. Makes sense. But it splits into 4 different places, and it goes to each of these centers in your body. And mainly the spinal column, it's sending signals up. With 24 elders, the 12 cranial pairs of nerves, it sends signals out of your brain related to the 5 senses primarily. And that nerve, the 10th one, is the vagus nerve, and you hear a lot about that in psychological circles, about having a dysregulated vagus nerve and how to attack that to heal it. I know very little about that. Dr. LaPera, she got it. Number 13. No, well, the 7th, when it gets poured out, it's on the air, and air is associated with the heart center, the heart chakra, and that's when in the very next verse it says it is done. So that's when the Battle of Armageddon is over. Is when you pour that bowl of wrath out on the air, representing the heart center. Number 13, Babylon the Great, Hagar. We kind of talked about her. She's riding the red dragon because his authority was given to Leviathan. That's the Hagar persona. So she's riding the authority of the red dragon. And here's a real curious verse. It said, "Here's the mind which has wisdom," and it's verse 9 and 10. 7 kings, there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is. The other has not come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. So you have the 7 kings, the 7 spiritual centers. 5 have already opened. And you got number 1, number 2, number 3. The heart center is still being battled for at this point. And then it's got to hang around long enough for you to go through the dark night of the soul to get reoriented. That's why that king's just got to hang around. It's that period of time. And 1,000 years in the Bible, that's always used as an appropriate amount of time. So it's going to be different for all of us. Some may just, crank right through it. It all depends on how fortified your ego was in the first place, how stubborn, and how much did it need those things that he identified with. I was so identified with that part of me that I needed to be broken, and I got broken. And then there's one that is. It just is. And that's the church at Laodicea. It says, hey, you're either hot, you're cold, or you're lukewarm. I'd rather you be hot or cold, not lukewarm. but it just is. You're gonna slot in one of those three places, and it all depends on how everything goes before it. Then Babylon is fallen. Verse 18:7, it says, "I sit as a queen, but I'm not a widow." And then it references back to the verses in the Old Testament, and in those sections, it's talking about you were in the Garden of Eden. So it's basically saying, hey, I'm Eve. I'm Eve in the Hagar persona. I'm not a widow because Adam and dead, he just hadn't woken up. And so that's just kind of the reference to that. Number 15, judgment. The rest of the dead, this is 25, it kind of gets back to what we already talked about. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. So when you get through that dark night, and then you're really not dead anymore, that's when you resurrect. That's when you've crucified the lower self, the image of the false self, the ego self, and you've resurrected into the Christed nature. 26, blessed and holy is the one who has a part in the first resurrection. Over these, the second death has no power. And that gets back into the lake of fire stuff. And here I want to reread that verse, number 84, in the Gospel of Thomas, and just kind of revisit that. I mean, it's bizarre, right? I mean, Jesus said, when you see your likeness, you are happy. But when you see your images that came into being before you, your images that came into being before you, and that neither die, they're never gone. They become part of your story celestially. Nor become visible when you're incarnated. You don't get to see those guys, the guys that came before you. Now, there's a lot of past lives regression stuff going on, and I don't have an opinion. I don't know. When you listen to the stuff, it's pretty interesting. And then near-death experiences. I've watched a bunch of those and read about them, and it's curious, But I haven't read a single one where they went out and they saw Satan, no matter what mode they were in. And then the other verse is verse 49, and its relevance in this context. Jesus said, "Congratulations to those who are alone and chosen, for you will find the kingdom. For you have come from it, and you will return there again." So he says, those that have awakened, you're going to go to the kingdom that you started out in when you were one. But for those that don't, you're going to the lake of fire. Two different places. I mean, one's heaven and one's hell. And I think the lake of fire, this is my position for now, is, you die and you didn't make it. And then you see why you didn't make it. And you went into it with all these great plans and expectations that this time I'm going to figure it out. And you missed it. And, he said, just what feelings are you going to have to bear knowing that you have to see where you got tripped up. And it's probably similar to what you got tripped up with before. And then I got to go back into that meat sack. And I don't want to do it, because I might miss it again. There you go. Big stuff. Okay, number 16, the new heavens, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, river of tree of life, the 12 kinds of fruit it yields. So here we go back to the tree of life, the spinal cord. It has 4 sections. And this is kind of funny to me, this one. It starts off, we're born with 33 vertebrae. We eventually end up with the 24, 27, somewhere in there, depending on you. In Genesis 22, or Genesis 2, 22 through 44, it's in the creation account. It describes the 4 rivers, and it starts bottom up. And it starts with the first one is the Pishon, then the Gihu, the Tigris, and then the Euphrates. And these are all related to sections, spiritual centers in your body. And Euphrates is at the top. and it's coming out of Eden. So it's coming out of the throne of God, because Eden is associated with the same place as the Ark of the Covenant. And it has 7 vertebrae. So it's pretty curious. 7's a number of completion. And there it is, right there in our bodies. And then you have the Tigris is associated with Assyria. And it has 12 vertebrae. Once again, it's in that heart center, 12 ribs, 12 vertebrae, and it's associated with Assyria, which is kind of that psychic realm as you're coming out of complete unconsciousness and you're starting to rise in your ascension. And then Gihu is the lumbar, so it's that section, kind of the stomach, the bowels, and what have you. And it's called the land of Cush, which is the son of Ham. And so that's the lower self side of the nations, and it's identified with Cush. And that's part of our nature that wants to be comfortable. It's kind of funny, right? Cush. And then Pishon, Havilah, is that lower part, the sacral. It's called the sacrum. And it's associated with the land of Havilah and Ishmael. And that's where Ishmael went to inhabit, and he built out the lands of Havilah, just like Ham built out the land of Cush. And the name Pishon for your lower self, I don't want to really do it, but I can't help it. Pishon. That's too much. And then Havilah, I want to have a lot. That's what that area wants. I want a lot of it. I want to have a lot of it. Anyways, that's too funny. Okay, so we're done with setting up the ride, and it's 51 minutes and just 52. You're just going to I'm sorry, it's going to be long. Okay. So once again, this is taking away that the ego self attaches to and identifies with. This is really going to go pretty quick. The first chakra, it starts in chapter 6, and it goes through this battle inside. In the first chakra and it goes through chapter 9, verse 15. And it's where it says, the first woe is past, behold, 2 woes are still coming after these things. So with all the prep that I've given you with the imagery, you can read it yourself and you can see it play out. How the earth, water, fire, and air shows up, and the nature of these plagues and pestilence and famine and all those things. The second chakra begins with the 6th trumpet and the army of the east. The army of the east symbolizes the army coming out. That's where the sun rises. That's the resurrection. And so, that's the higher self rising, coming to fight this battle. It begins in the very next verse, chapter 9, verse 13, and it ends in Revelation 11:14, where it says, hey, the second woe is past, and there's still one more to come. And once again, the earth is associated with the lower 3. The heart center's under the authority of the serpent persona, so therefore, that's why it starts out back with the 4 horsemen, that they would be given authority over the 4, but the battle is only happening in the 3. And you got to get through those 3 before you can complete the battle for the heart center, which is, land unique of itself, which is what it calls it in the book of Daniel. And there's a number of verses in the Bible where he says, I set Jerusalem in the middle of the nations. So it's in the middle of the lower self and the higher self. The third chakra. Now this is the battle for dominion. And it's a more intricate kind of battle, because you almost got to finish that battle. It continues all the way through. You got to finish that, and it almost culminates at the same time that you win your heart center back. And it begins with the sounding of the 7th trumpet, which is the last of the 7 trumpets, which kind of goes back to Paul saying, hey, when the 7th trumpet sounds, you go from being mortal to immortal, from perishable to imperishable. And this is where the higher image that's when you see the two images. And this really ends when Satan is hurled back to the earth, but the serpent doesn't acknowledge that. So he just changes tactics at that point, and that's when the beast of the sea comes out and the beast of the earth, and they came out of their subconscious because you've seen them down there. So they can no longer hide. And this is where all pretense falls away. I mean, it's just battle royal. That guy doesn't want to die, and he's going to call out all stops, and he's going to make you fearful. He's going to make you not want to continue. I mean, quit deconstructing my ego. I want it back. And in my meditations, I go through that dialogue that I'm basically having, with this struggle of, it telling me, man, just let me back in. But it didn't really end until the seventh bowl of wrath that's, poured out on the air. And that's when it said it's done. So that's the battle for authority and control. It goes through, even though it officially ended when he got thrown out of heaven. And that's why, going back to the status check, hey, there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen. The higher self knows that he's no longer in control. He's deceiving himself. He knows his time is short. So then the official ending for that is just acknowledgement. He can't acknowledge that he can even fight anymore. So that kind of culminates when the battle for the heart center is over as well. So the 4th chakra is the heart center, and that's what the whole rest of it's about. I mean, I've already kind of given you everything you need to kind of walk through it. But a key verse is Revelation 16, 13 and 16, and I just wanted to read that. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon and the mouth of the beast. Now that's the whole account. But the verse I want to read is 15. Behold, it's in parens. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes, so that he will not walk about naked and men will not see his shame. And I read that one to you before, but this is kind of where it fits in this narrative. In the battle royal part, this is the mention of nakedness and the shame and awakening. Stay awake. Then it goes on. Babylon is fallen. We get the status check, 1710. Fourfold hallelujah, the marriage preparations, the coming of Christ, doom of the beast, the false prophet. Chapter 20, Satan's bound, the dark night of the soul, 1,000 years. Satan free, don't need to be doomed again for good. At this point, you're fully conscious. You have the judgment before the great white throne of judgment. That's when you see the rights to your white garments. And then you have the new heaven and new earth. Chapter 21 begins with there is no longer any sea. Eve is dissolved back into Adam, back into unity consciousness. And then you go to the river and the tree of life. It's crystal, it's clear as crystal. So now you're regulated. You've gone from a dysregulated state to a regulated state. That fluid is clear, and impulses and thoughts are being generated out of a Christed heart center. So closing thoughts. This is a lot, and it's taken me a long time to get to it and to wrap this up. But it's kind of like, you're at this place where you hear what you hear. You got to make a choice. And some of you could be really angry at me, and I'm sorry about that. It's not my intent. This is experiential spirituality, and I want you to understand what that is. And that's what this channel is going to be about. And I'm just going to wrap it up. If you are feeling anxiety about this, just say a little prayer. Say, hey, God, has my Cain killed my Abel? Tell me that. And if you're disturbed, then you will know your answer. And so with that, I'm going to let you go. It's time for me to move on, and that's the introduction of the book. That's the introduction of the channel. This is about experiential spirituality. as defined by me. You take care. Bye-bye.